Hello everyone, and welcome to the Soul World, where we talk about dreams and other spiritual topics. Today, I thought I would share one of my own personal dreams. This is actually going to be one of the longest dreams that I ever had, so I thought I would share it today. Just to give a little bit of background on this dream. I grew up as a Christian. I was a Christian my whole life, but kind of going through high school and college, I wasn't really very active. It was kind of always there, sort of in the back of my mind. I have this, spiritual life, but I wasn't really very active in it. And then when I started doing the Bible studies a little more frequently with the church here, that was when I had this dream. I'll have to pull it up on my phone and read it off because, it's a little long for me to try to remember every single detail, but I thought I would share it because there's a lot of kind of unique details in this dream. So the dream starts off, I'm with my friends. We're actually all just lounging around on a golf course. Back at that time, I was playing a lot of golf, and so I was with a few of my friends. We're basically just laying down, having snacks, laying down on this golf course. And the sky and the clouds, everything was really bright. It was a really nice scene. All of a sudden, there was this huge river of ash that just came in our direction. They call it like a pyroclastic flow, I guess. It was moving in our direction. Spouts of fire began to erupt, and the sky was turning red. The spouts seemed to be coming from a volcano in the distance at first, but there were too many of them to be coming from just one volcano. I was trying to get everyone's attention and point them to the danger, but they couldn't see it and they were reacting too slowly. So I grabbed the arm of one of my friends and just began to run. The river of ash began to pile up on itself, kind of like an avalanche, growing larger and larger as it approached until it became a wave. A giant tsunami, and it was tumbling across the land in our direction. There was this white helicopter flying above the tsunami, and this made me feel really, really uncomfortable. I don't know why. So I kept trying to run with one of my friends, but then we became separated. There was a lot of people where we were running. It seemed kind of like we were in a city, but it also felt a little bit like a prison. Some of these people saw that giant river of ash that was coming, and they began to run as fast as they could, and they were sprinting and tripping and falling as they were running. But most of the people, they just went about their day as normal, as if nothing was happening. There was these huge walls that were at least 100 feet high, and they were really thick and made of metal. And the walls were retractable, and I was thinking, we could run there, they could close these walls, and it'll protect us from this danger that's coming. And so there were people operating the machinery which, moved these walls, and they began to grab hold of the people who were running. They were grabbing all these people that were running, and they forced them to come to a stop and telling them, hey, you guys need to stop and you need to wait. It was like they were giving people instructions for something. I didn't know what it was for. So I made it past one of these walls, and then I was stopped. And then I realized that my friends were on the other side, and so I wanted to get back to them. And when the walls closed, it became dark, like we were underground or maybe in some sort of bunker like you'd think of where people would go to get away from, say, a nuclear bomb or a nuclear explosion. So we were all put into lines, and we were instructed to follow these very, very specific procedures. I was waiting in a line by the wall that I thought could lead me back to my friends. So in that line, I saw some people that I knew and some other people who had physical disabilities that I had known, but I was just trying not to think about too much at that time. So I waited in this line until I got inside the wall, which was this big sort of maze of elevators and different passages. There was this man who led me into a yellow elevator, and he told me that I was gonna have to be one of the people that saw this really, really bright flash. He was almost going to let me pass, but according to the rules, I would have to go and participate in this. And I could see through the elevator walls and kept looking for my friends. Once or twice I thought I saw them, but the walls were closed and soundproof, and so I couldn't get their attention. We were let out of the elevator onto some small boat or ferry in one of the passageways, and we were given a pair of these goggles. And we were taken to a man who was giving us instructions for what to do when this really, really bright flash struck. He said that we were not to use our hands to cover our eyes or to touch our faces. He said it was going to be really, really difficult, and so I practiced closing my eyes really, really tightly, imagining what it would be like during that really, really bright flash, whatever they were talking about. And I remember I was feeling really, really lonely at this time also. Time seemed to pass. I wasn't sure how much time, but I was down in that network of sort of mazes within the wall for all that time, eating meals and feeling very tired and kind of groggy. I wondered when I'd be able to leave, and I felt trapped. Then I found myself on the streets of a gray and dark city. It was mostly empty, and it felt as if it had been deserted. There were papers fluttering through the streets, and it was windy and cold. Then I saw a group of people coming out of a very large building, dressed in expensive business attire. Across the street, I saw a shelf of books. I wasn't sure where I was or what had happened. So I went toward the shelf and saw that almost every book was marked with the date, November 2nd, 11-2. This was the day when I saw the ash and the fire and that giant tsunami that had come. Some of the covers on the books had different names on them. One of them was St. Helena, which at the time I thought was a volcano, but after researching, after I had the dream, I found out that St. Helens was actually the volcano, and St. Helena was where the island where Napoleon had been exiled. So I hadn't even known that, but it showed up in my dream like this, so that was kind of interesting. And one of the books had Saint Montaigne on it, which also I didn't know who this was, but he ended up being this really, really notable French essayist from the past. So kind of more to come on that later. So all of these books had the date November 2nd clearly marked on the front. One book was different from all the rest, and it was a series of epic poems that was following the transition into a new time period. The poems were about some character whose name was either Ode or Gilead. I couldn't remember, but it was a name kind of like that. And I tried to read through one of the books to figure out more of what had happened on that date, but it seemed that little was known about this event and its aftermath. There were a lot of conspiracy theories and speculation about the government's involvement in the event. This crowd of people left a building, and so then I went inside that building. It was a grocery store. I was passing through the bakery and produce sections when I saw a calendar. It was open to the month of February. I thought it had to be a mistake, so I asked a young woman behind the counter who worked at the store, is it really February? She said it was. I asked her again just to be sure. She said yes, and she looked at me as if I was crazy. I couldn't believe that over 4 months had passed since that day. It seemed like it was only a few days. I made my way through the aisles of food and supplies until I ran into a young man dressed in a black t-shirt. I asked him if he knew anything about St. Helena or this event that had taken place. He said little was known by anyone. He then asked me where he could find something. I couldn't understand what he was asking for because he was using this really indirect language. I asked him to repeat himself several times, and finally he asked me straight away, and he made an inappropriate comment which I won't repeat for the purposes of this video, but this was really off-putting to me, so I just wanted to leave. And as I attempted to do so, I knocked over one of the smaller shelves in the aisle, and everything fell out in really, really neat, organized lines. Basically, there was a whole wall of food and cans, and I knocked it over, and then they all fell like in just completely perfect shapes and like geometrical lines. That was really kind of strange. The young man made a joke to put me at ease. He said I was just having one of those days, but for me, I just wanted to leave. Finally, I was in the car with my mom, who had come to pick me up. We were driving up a very narrow dirt road that was winding up this hill. The road became large and ran up the side of the mountain, overlooking the valley and the plains below. I asked my mom about this event and about St. Helena and how much time had passed and why we were left there for so long, and I was asking her what had really happened. They had not come for us, my mom said, because they thought that it was best to leave those in charge of the situation to handle it as they saw fit. Those of us who had been involved in the event were apparently entrusted to these people for as long as we needed to be. I didn't like this, and I felt uneasy as I thought about it again, and I was reflecting on this tsunami and that helicopter that was just riding overhead watching. I thought about the time that had passed, and I was like, I missed my birthday. I checked my phone, and I saw I had these texts that I had missed, and I thought I remembered having some sort of dinner that night I was supposed to have to celebrate. And I thought that this text meant that my friends were okay, but I couldn't be sure. I thought about all of the people that had parents and family and friends that had taken part in this event. That was kind of where the dream ended. Kind of a very long dream, and when I woke up from this dream, I was really, really shocked because in my whole life, I had never had a dream this long or this detailed or this vivid. It was probably the first of what I would say, were these kind of like deeper, more spiritual dreams. So I got right up. It was like 3 a.m. and I was writing for something like, I could have at that time probably just pulled out my computer, but I was writing it down by hand. I was using a lot of like handwritten journals at that time, and I wrote it down. It took like, 3 or 4 hours, something like that, to kind of write it down because I was also reflecting on it as I did it, and I wanted to get all the details right. One of the things that I had learned in the Bible studies right before I had this dream was about, this lesson about the end times. People have this idea that, you read the Bible and you think, at the end times, there's going to be bodies coming out of the grave and planes are going to be crashing, and it's going to be just this crazy apocalyptic scene. But the scary thing is that a lot of times, if we misinterpret the parables in the Bible, we can have the wrong interpretation of how these things are going to play out in reality. A lot of times what the Bible describes, in the cases where you have locusts with like a human head or things like that, the earth coming and getting burned by fire, these are parables that sort of describe the spiritual situation, and they're the spiritual language. And you look at a lot of the dreams that people, even the figures in the Bible had, it's the same thing. It shows a lot of the spiritual situation. Of course, sometimes it does show an actual physical thing that plays out in a physical way. But in this case, for myself as well, looking at this dream, I felt like that it was showing sort of the spiritual side. Just to go over a few things in the dream, I'm sitting there lounging around with my friends, to be honest, in my whole life, I never laid around on a golf course with my friends. To me, when I look at that, and if I think of it from the perspective of parables, golf is kind of something that me and my family would do just to relax, every once in a while. So I'm sitting there just relaxing with my friends. That's kind of like my daily life, the state of my daily life. But when you're not expecting it, all of a sudden this huge tsunami of ash comes rolling in. Again, for me, that never happened. And I hope it doesn't happen, in a physical sense where there's an actual volcanic eruption that I see that's coming at me. For me, one of the things that I thought that could possibly represent is the spiritual judgment. If you continue to live a certain way, eventually things are separated out, right? And so I'm running, and I can't get out. Then I find these people who are able to help me. And in my mind, I was thinking that's the people from my church who are helping me and explaining sort of about the Bible and about, these are the kind of things that we need to be aware of right now. And again, I got locked underground. I was separated out from the things that were comfortable, but I was able to learn and make it through it. And then afterwards, there's all these books. People are trying to figure out, what happened about this event. People really, really try to study in retrospect these things that happen when you have these really important times throughout human history. People look back on it and try to analyze it. That's what I felt like looking at that with those books. And then just being with my mom, it was kind of like, I think that was just me kind of expressing what I was feeling because it's kind of a time of confusion. Change isn't always comfortable, but yeah, I was shocked because I had never had a dream that went into such vivid detail as this dream. And I was never, the feelings had never been so real. And most of the dreams that I had, they were always kind of hazy, but it felt more clear and real, even than as if I was, going around in my daily life. I guess kind of just a few closing thoughts to keep that in mind, that discerning, especially when you look at the Bible and try to understand, about the end of the world, it's really, really important to discern what's a parable and what's not. And that's what I learned right before I had this dream, and I felt like it was played out in the things that I saw in my dream. So I know it was a little bit longer today. I apologize for having to read off my phone. My memory's not quite that great yet. We'll hopefully be back again soon with another dream. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.